Worthington. Oh, brilliant Mark Worthington. Time ticking away. Belding has to make the play. At the top of the three. Wow, she goes! Chris Golding, that is a super shot. Unbelievable performance. Golding against Martin. He'll have to shoot from way out. No, it's in the hands of Worthington. Oh! On the buzzer, Mark Worthington. He's a gun. He's come back. His first appearance at the Perth Arena, and he has ended a 8-game winning streak.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is NBL Rewind. Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. And there's a fair chance, if you haven't, you should watch the game that we just put out. NBL TV, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you get your NBL content. This game was a good one. Of course, the Perth Wildcats, it was a championship-winning season for them. They're at home. They never lose. Well, barely anyway. And in rolled the Melbourne Tigers, and they were star-studded, led by our very next superstar guest. But before that, Liam Santa Maria. Hello, buddy.
Hello, man. I'm excited to have Wortho on the show.
Yeah, and of course, there is Wortho, who's looking, we will get to this at some point, looks in almost game shape. Looks almost as fit as we've seen through what was a decorated career, both here in Australia, overseas, and of course in the Australian jersey as well. Mark Worthington, hello to you.
It's like NBL overtime is back together again.
Yeah.
How are we?
It's good. We're going to let you talk a little more about your career this time rather than cutting you off when we didn't like what you had to say about something last time. But, hey, this is all about you, and this is a cool game. Like, this is such a cool game.
Hold on. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about how good Wortho looks.
Oh, I was going to end on that.
Let's start on it. Let's have it in the middle.
Okay.
Let's have it at the end. The man looks like he's in his 20s.
He does.
Western Australia life serving you well, Wortho.
Well, yeah, it's funny. COVID sucks for a lot of people, but it came for the right time for me. And instead of continuing to stack on the kilos, I decided to do something about it and made the most of the opportunity. And not far off playing weight at the moment, which is good, but nowhere near playing form. I can tell you that. Those days are long gone.
Well, you are coaching. Well, while we're at what you're currently doing and how 2020 has, you are currently coaching in the SBL over there and got a young crew from what I hear, but it's all going in the right direction. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I took over a team that won one game last season. It was my hometown of Bunbury. We are the Southwest Slammers, and I decided to just say, look, if I'm going to be around for a couple of years, let's just put in place, grab a real young team. I've got over 50% of my kids are 17 years or younger, which means a lot of under 18 playing, giving them court time that they hadn't been given in the past. And it's been a steep learning curve for them this year. It's been a steep learning curve for myself this year. But really enjoying it all. And we've got 3 weeks left of the season. We've got 2 wins under our belt already, and hopefully we can add to that before the season.
You never went home and played for the Wildcats over the course of your NBL career, but are you enjoying being back in that hometown and kind of giving back to the game where it all began for you?
Look, anyone that knows me well enough knew that I hated the Wildcats. And I got good satisfaction out of beating the Wildcats. And now I like going to their games and watching the Wildcats. And I got to go watch a couple of games last year. One being Cairns Taipans, first game that they went there and they beat the Wildcats. The other game when I sat on the bench with the Adelaide 36ers when they beat the Wildcats. So that's been really good and enjoyable for me. That being said, I'll probably be at a few more Wildcats games this year and enjoy watching them. Obviously, there's guys that are running around our state league here that are playing for the Wildcats. I enjoy watching all those young guys go on with their careers and hopefully make good NBL careers.
But being back in Bunbury, though, like that aspect of it for you?
Look, the 2 years prior, living in Melbourne and Los Angeles, Bunbury is a little bit smaller, just like not much. But it is good being around family, spending time with not only mum and dad, but my brother and my sister. it's been nearly 20 years since I lived here, and that's been really enjoyable, being around family again that I haven't been able to spend, extended time with. So I've really enjoyed it. Bunbury has been really, really good to me since I got back here and looked after me. And, like you said, there's not too many better places in the world right now than WA that you'd rather be in. And even though we didn't get an AFL grand final, which is pretty understandable because Brisbane and the Gabba have done a mountain of work to keep the AFL competition on. It's actually been really cool to see quite a few games that were over at Optus Stadium. And, most of my Victorian mates are very jealous when I continue to send photos, whether it was the Derby, the games with Collingwood are here as well. I've enjoyed a fair bit of footy in the West as well.
How would Coach Wortho, or how would Coach Wortho have handled player Wortho?
I'd probably tell myself to pull my head out of my ass a few times, I reckon. But I don't know. I think the game has changed. Like when you speak to a few of my ex-coaches, I was sort of like the last of the old breed almost. And today's kids need a lot more confidence and a lot more teaching and understanding. And that's been a really fine balance of knowing, how far do we push? How do we still keep them confident? How do we still teach them constantly? And so that part of coaching I'm really, really enjoying as I sort of start this new development as a head coach with senior men.
Is this long-term goal, like just continue to rise up the ranks and see where this thing ends? Is that what it is for you? I mean, like obviously you're getting, and you look fit. So I'm telling you, if you want to keep looking like that and have that gorgeous flowing locks continue, I probably wouldn't get into head coaching, but it is what it is. But is this what you're thinking you would like to develop into and look towards the NBL and maybe beyond?
Look, I'd like to get there one day, but if I could learn from past experiences of mates of mine that have probably jumped into that seat too early, you want to sort of pay your dues a little bit and understand what you think as a coach and not necessarily what other people are telling you to do as a coach.
Yep.
And in that aspect, I've got a long, long way to go as far as what I want to do. Maybe coaching isn't for me and I'll find that out in my journey. But at the same time, I think I've been afforded the luxury of so many fantastic coaches throughout my career that I can sort of draw from each one a little bit. And then with the understanding of what I used to hate to play against, I think as well, and sort of piece that all together. And I've started to do that in my own way, but I've still got a very, very long, long way to go until I'd even consider probably getting into the NBL because I feel like I've got so much to learn about myself as a coach first.
And that's, I guess, what so much of development is in any walk of life. Right. Anything else on this before we get to the game, Liam?
No. Good to go.
All right. This is what I'm going to do here because it's the walk-off 3. It's your first time back in Perth Arena. You're up against the Wildcats. The Tigers team you were playing for was really good that year, made a semi-final and lost in game 3 to the 36ers. So you can start with whatever story you want. Do you want to start with the very end of the game? Is there a backstory leading into it? Where do you want to start this chat?
Well, there's actually 2 stories to go with this.
Okay.
This was my first season back from Serbia. Perth Arena had been open the year before and the Wildcats were playing. I'd been in talks with Rob Beveridge, and to that point, I had agreed to go to the Perth Wildcats under Rob Beveridge.
Wow.
This is the big story, and I don't know how much I should say.
I say it all.
But,
Mate, a lot of water gone under the bridge. It's time to just let this stuff out.
Yeah, but I had agreed to come to Perth and play for Bevo and become a Wildcat. A little bit after I'd verbally agreed, Bevo gets fired as the coach. Trevor Gleeson comes in. Now, I had Trevor Gleeson's number, so I called Trevor Gleeson and just said, look, I left a voicemail. I'd pretty much agreed to come to Perth with Bevo. If you're interested in me, let me know. Crickets, nothing. Didn't get, so I was like, okay. At the same time, I was obviously talking with the Melbourne Tigers and Chris Anstey, and most people would know that Chris is one of my really, really close mates. And so I hadn't told Chris no, but I told Bevo verbally yes, which turned into a quick, yes, I'm coming to the Melbourne Tigers. Chris takes me to Larry Kesselman's office, owning the club back then. And Larry asked the question, why would I want to bring him in coming off a shoulder reconstruction? And Chris's answer was, this is the guy that you want to bring to Perth to win in Perth, because I think at that stage, the Melbourne Tigers had lost 8 consecutive trips to Perth at that stage.
Mm.
So, Larry says, no worries. Obviously, it gets ticked off and I go. As I'm going to the game, we're in the hotel and the lift doors open at the bottom. There's Larry as I'm walking out. And the last thing he says to me, do you remember what you promised me? And I said, I do. And so, lo and behold, we get to the game. The last play wasn't designed for me. It was designed for Chris Goulding.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be Chris's play. And I had just made a read, having looked at Sean and saw that Redditch had fallen asleep and was just watching the ball, that I'd make a quick lift. And as I say, the rest is history.
So did you at all hear from Trevor Gleeson or anyone from Perth Wildcats? I understand only a verbal with a coach who was no longer there, but you didn't hear from anyone at all after that?
No, nothing from that. And the other parts of the story is Lockie Reed came and talked to me before the game. And he had asked me, what do you think of the new arena? And I said, I love it. And he goes, what's so good about it? And I said, there's so many more Wildcats fans to shut up at the end of the game now once I win this one today. And so I'd said that to him before the game. Me that never lacked confidence as a player. I knew that we were going there and we were going to give it our best shot. And we were, I was lucky to be put in that position to make a game winner, but it's always easier to make a game winner when it's tied at 80-80. If you're 1 or 2 points down, those are the real walk-off game winners. But that being said, there's still no complaints. And I'd love that fan that ran across the screen at the end, out of the stands and joined our huddle as well. There was just so much good stuff about that game and good memories.
Tommy Greer tells me I think he had 0 points in a whole bunch of minutes. But he said he had a good speech at some point, maybe half time or 3/4 time in that. He said it was a good moment for him in his captaincy. But I watched the end of that game, and you see the celebrations. You guys are running, jumping into each other, and you see Chris pointing at you. How much did you enjoy playing for Chris?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, we were mates. Obviously, the backstory with Chris and I is I hated Chris as a player. Chris and I didn't get along when, those Sydney Kings, Melbourne Tigers, grand finals. I put my elbow through his face and gave him quite a few stitches. Chris used to elbow everyone. That was common nature. And it wasn't until we got onto the Australian team together that we found out that we had so much in common and we thought so much alike and all that. And then we got back from the Beijing Olympics and we lived 150 meters down the road from each other. And so our friendship was more out of respect to start off with. It was like a mutual respect of what we did for our teams on the court and how we went about our business. It didn't mean we had to like each other. Even as mates, that last season of the Sydney Kings, we still knew as soon as we crossed the line, like there is no friends, there is no mates. I think that makes that style of basketball different to what it is today. Like people still are very friendly. We see it in the NBA and all the old players talk about how much they hate all the friendliness between mates. Chris and I genuinely wanted to beat the living snot out of each other and win the game knowing that you got the other person's best, Mm-hmm. And then, once that time I played with him in his last season at the Melbourne Tigers. That team, you know, him and Sam McKinnon going out in the same year, really injury-plagued season for the Tigers that year. We probably didn't deliver on what that team should have been. And then Chris stepping into that seat, and we had a lot of tough conversations. I enjoyed Chris's teaching, that a lot of stuff that he brought from his Dallas Mavericks, Chicago Bulls days, Brian Gorgian, you know, sort of stuff in his own sort of twist as well. So playing for Chris, I really, really enjoyed it. And, you know, the circumstances where, you know, after one game at Melbourne United getting let go was a really tough pill for me to swallow personally, being on the team. Mm-hmm. You sort of felt responsible in a lot of ways. And there's always stuff that's happening behind the scenes that the players don't know about. But I really felt for Chris, and I hope when the time is right that he gets another opportunity somewhere down the track, because he's done a lot of good stuff in junior basketball for a long period of time now. And, you know, it'd be good to see him back in the NBL.
Just on that, and we actually spoke to Brett Maher about this exact thing a couple of weeks ago. Everyone's in different parts of the world or playing against each other, then they all get thrown in wearing your Australian jersey, and you all got to be teammates and work together. One, how did you find it? And two, was there another player that, similar to that, Anstey, maybe not to that friendship, but where you like couldn't stand, then when you get to know them, you're like, you know what? We've got a fair bit in common when it comes to what we're chasing.
No, it's just Chris.
Okay,
just
fair enough.
The Australian stuff is, I mean, I love playing for Australia. I feel really, really lucky that I got to play 10 seasons with the green and gold. There was something about it. It could have been a nothing. Well, it was never a nothing game to me. But like the games that no one knew in Australia that we were playing, you know, those games, every time we put on the green and gold, it meant something to me. And you sort of put anything to the side for the greater good. And for me, I think the culture of what the Boomers was and how we went about our business, and teams never really wanted to play us, like, because they knew that they were going to get our best shot. Mm-hmm. And for that, I'm really, really grateful for so many years that I got that opportunity to do it, and play with so many great players as well, and share those moments that, you know, Paddy Mills hitting a 3 versus Russia, you know, being the guy to set the screen for him, you know, playing against Team USA and not calling LeBron or Kobe by their name and just calling them by their number. I mean, that's stuff that you look back, and one day I'll be able to tell Taz and Axel even more about the stories of what I was able to do and who I was able to play against. And, you know, something that's pretty special being a kid from Bunbury and what I was able to do.
So good listening to you reflect on those times, because you could really tell how much you love playing for Australia. Like, and it's interesting to hear you talk about the games when no one in Australia knew that they were on. What I will remember about you in the green and gold is actually the games, the way you played in the games, everyone knew it was on and knew what time and what channel, specifically against the US, you know, and against the best countries in the world. Because as a guy, as one of those folks in the lounge room, proud of being Australian and wanting the Boomers to do well, I always felt great about you being on the floor in those games, because you always had a crack. You know, like their length and athleticism was a big issue for us, but you with your physicality and your just endeavor always felt like, you know what, he's going to get that defense. He's not going to get pushed out of the way or jumped over. He's going to secure it, and we're going to be off on our way down the other end. Is that your mentality playing for the Boomers in those kind of games? Like, you know what? Get out of like, I will guard him. I'll happily guard LeBron, because I'm going to have a crack.
Well, funnily enough, I remember 2006 World Champs, and I hadn't played a whole lot, and I ended up starting after we lost that game against Greece. I think we played against Qatar the next game, and I top scored versus Qatar. And then Gorgian comes to me and he goes, who would you rather start on? Would you rather start on Dwayne Wade, who was like Flash Dwayne Wade at that stage, or LeBron James? And I'm like thinking, well, yeah, thanks, Gorge. There's a lot of good options in that one. And then with my confidence, I said, I think I match up better versus LeBron. Because Dwayne Wade was just ultra quick.
Yeah.
And I really realized how much LeBron, just speed and physicality, was just light years ahead of everyone else. But the one thing that I always took was my dad had said to me, he goes, just remember they're human at the end of the day. They will make mistakes. They still bleed, all that sort of stuff. Now, what Dad didn't realize was how good of humans they are at the game of basketball. But that was sort of the attitude that I never really cared who I was matched up against. And I never really cared. You always took those battles personally. Mm-hmm. And you always wanted to do what was right by the team, taking a charge, early rotations, all that sort of stuff, which I sort of prided myself on doing. And, if I look at the current day Boomers, I love watching Nick Kay play. Like that, not only is he wearing my old number, but he sort of plays very similar to the way that I used to play for the Boomers. And like you were with me, I'm the same way with Nick Kay now, going, all right, I know something good's going to happen on the court.
No backward step.
And you know what? When you put all this talent together, you don't need everyone to be a superstar. Mm-hmm. You need guys to be able to play their role, understand their role. I knew what my role was. My role was not to be a scorer. My role was to play great defense and go chase boards. And to me, and be a great teammate off the bench, whether that means I played, 10 minutes or 0 minutes, it didn't really bother me. I was always going to give my best, and I was always going to support the guys that were on the court. Because at the end of the day, if you put on the green and gold, man, it's an honor just to be there. And if you get your opportunity, you got to grab that with two hands and just run with it.
Well, see, I reckon though, like you always played big minutes in those games, and it must have been partly because the coaching staff could see that no fear in your eyes. I mean, could you see fear in some other teammates' eyes with those games?
No, I think we got to the point, and I was very lucky that I grew up, probably at the end stage for a few of these Boomers, but I was there at the start for that as well. Mm-hmm. Never had fear. Joe never had fear. Joe was the lippiest person, even as a young fella for the Boomers. Mm-hmm. I don't think we ever had fear going into those games. We always knew our backs were going to be against the wall, but we had each other, and that's all we needed. Mm. We knew that was the brotherhood that we had formed as a group. And, I probably did get a few more minutes in those sort of games. But I love those games. Those are the games where you just, what do you have to lose? It is what it is at the end of the day. And, I was pretty fortunate to play in those games. And I think the least amount of minutes I played in a game was against Angola. And Brett Brown put me on with 10 seconds to go on the game to get a stop at the end of the game. And those were the best 10 seconds of my Boomers career, because we ended up getting a stop and I drew a foul and the guy who was trying to score on me. And so, that sort of stuff I just love.
The love and the emotion still spews out of you. The exact thing that Liam spoke about before, it's still so prevalent today, just having this conversation. If they are able to medal at Tokyo, or whenever they get, and I'm talking to men's, of course, the Boomers, win that elusive medal, what would it mean? What will the emotions be for you as a retired player?
I'll tell you, the last couple have brought me to tears. The guys, I think it's more so that I know how close that they are. Mm-hmm. When I was playing, we were never there. We were the battlers. We punched above our weight in games, whether it be like Lithuania in Beijing or Russia in London. Those were the games that made us special and who we were, and games that teams didn't want to play against. This group, they should have won a medal already. They've been robbed a couple of times over, and it's a really tough pill to swallow. But hopefully we can get out of this. The boys can go to Tokyo. They can win that medal finally. And, you know, I couldn't be prouder of where the Boomers are as a nation right now, of how we play our basketball and how we do our business, because it's just so great to watch.
You've played a role in that, as have all those past Boomers. Let's talk about your NBL career a little bit.
Hang on 1 second. Just before we get off playing for Australia, I do want to know.
Yes.
Do you regret when you were needling LeBron and you were wearing his kicks? In hindsight, do you think you would have worn another pair of Nike?
Well, you gotta tell the story.
Well, tell it.
The story's pretty well known.
Yeah. So it was the first time playing against LeBron.
Mm-hmm.
Jump ball. Just wanted to let him know, you know, I didn't care who he was. And as the ball's up in the air, I decided to step on his foot and give him a little elbow just to let him know that I was there, you know. First, it hurt my elbow more than it hurt him. Secondly, yeah, he sort of smiled at me and said "mouse in the house" straight away, which I was like, it's really funny that they would call the first play "mouse in the house," but you know, whatever play that Coach K had drew up, he scrapped that on at the jump ball, and as he's walking down to the post, he just said, nice shoes. And so I'd look down and realize that I'd worn LeBron's the game, which is not a wise choice to make in any part. But once he called for the ball in the post, I sort of knew he was posting up on the left block because that was his favorite block. I knew he was going to do his one dribble, shoulder fake, try and lean in and go for his fade. So here he comes. He's come to the left block. So I'm like, tick, I've got that part right. I'm like, all right, he's going to take one dribble and do a shoulder fake. Tick, I've got that part right. What I didn't account for was how hard he was going to throw the elbow back at me. And so as he's gone to make space, as I'm still standing upright, my soul is now on the baseline near the rim. He goes up for his shot, and I remember putting my hand on top of the ball and thinking in my mind, my goodness, I'm about to block LeBron while being winded on the first play of the game. But as he goes up, he's that strong. He realizes that he's not getting the ball over me. So then he flicks it with his left hand and hits Shane Battier in the corner for a three to start the game. And I'm just like, there's probably a reason why he's the best in the world.
Hey, that's a win.
Yeah, it is. It is.
He had 6 points that game, and I had 5 points. So I called that a whitewash, even though I lost by 40.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Sitting and watching those games. And I think a lot of our viewers who had the exact same experience, this will resonate with, is saying, shit, LeBron and Kobe. So I'm passionate about this, man.
I like it.
You know, these are important games every time we play the US, and you go in thinking, I hope we don't get blown out. That's how it used to be. Now it's, let's win.
Yeah.
But at the time, I would feel, I hope we don't get blown out. And we gradually got to a point of nah, you know what? We're so close in the fourth quarter of these games these days. But you think about these guys who, if we get blown out, it's because LeBron's just going to run all over us. Kobe's going to run all over us. And then you look at the matchups and you go, actually, I'm comfortable with that because he's going to make life very difficult every possession.
Yeah, I also kept LeBron to a triple-double in my last game that I played against. So we won't get carried away. But I mean, at London, we were right in it. If it wasn't for Kobe, passion on fire, we'd followed the game plan down to a T. And Paddy was doing his thing and getting buckets, but our defense was great versus them.
Yes.
And then it wasn't until Kobe just starts lighting it up.
Bang, bang.
And when he passed away, my favorite video was of when he hit the three in front of their bench with me running to close him out. And I couldn't have closed him out any harder. And I felt like he was smiling at me the entire way, knowing that there was nothing I could do to stop what he was doing. And we definitely progressed from 2006 all the way to 2012, we had made huge inroads of how we went about our business and what we were doing. And for that, you know, I feel like those are the foundation steps that have been put in place for this current group of, you know, doesn't matter if you're an NBA All-Star now or an NBA star, you still play the same way that we had played the game, which was the same way that, you know, the Vlahovs used to play the game. And it's just been a bit of a lineage all the way through, and it's awesome to watch him play now.
What did Kobe mean to you?
Yeah, this was a tough one because you don't get time to fully reflect on it until something tragic happens. And I remember the day that I'd woken up and I'd had 20 messages on my phone already, and I was just like, all right, something's not right. And you know, the first one I was like, can't believe it. And I was like, you know, next message, wow, Kobe. And I was like, no way. And so then you start to go in it. But I think I ended up doing about maybe 15 to 20 media, whether it was radio or TV that day, because I'd played against him. And then you actually look back on it and you're like, it wasn't that long ago that we were on the same court together. You know, it wasn't that long ago that, you know, I took one of my best mates in Melbourne who had never left the country to go watch the Lakers play in Kobe's last season, and they beat the 73-9 Warriors. That, you know, that wasn't that long ago. And so Kobe to me represented winning. He represented professionalism, and he was bigger than basketball at the end of the day. Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, those three are forever going to be known as bigger than basketball.
We talk NBL now, Cam?
We can, Liam. Take it away.
Well, 4 All-NBL first team seasons in 5 years, all with different clubs.
Yeah.
I mean, at the peak of your powers in the NBL, it was a real roller coaster ride for you in terms of moving around from team to team.
It sucked. It sucked. It's funny. I never saw myself as a guy that would move teams.
Right.
I'd always, you know, even before I'd got to the NBL, teams in the state league over here had tried to move, like get a hold of me, and I was like, no, I want to play for Bunbury. That's my home. I'm good here. The Sydney Kings, obviously the whole firepower thing. South Dragons, which was just tragic in the end. The best basketball team I played with. Melbourne Tigers moving to Melbourne United is something that happens at the end of the day. And the Gold Coast Blaze folding. There's a lot of heartache there. A lot that, you know, the average person doesn't see. There's a lot of families that hurt. A lot of administrators that hurt as well. Because basketball clubs aren't built on just basketball players alone. There's a lot of front office staff and whatnot. And, you know, when I left the Kings to go to Melbourne and I first got to Melbourne, I thought, all right, that's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do about that. I loved Melbourne. I was like, I could live in Melbourne, you know. You do the Dragons, you do the Melbourne Tigers the year after that, and then it's sort of all. It's really tough to even put into words how frustrating that first 6 years, 7 years of my career was, because you didn't really want to. And then even at the end, having to leave Melbourne United after being the club MVP just stung, basically. And if I'm totally honest, it basketball in general it was a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth about my whole career. I couldn't be happier and, for the guys and what they get to experience now. And I hope that no one gets to experience the stuff that I went through and a lot of my teammates. But I guess the one good thing is, from the start of my career to my end of the career, the NBL got a lot better. And if I'm looking playing wise, I probably retired at the right time, personally. But it would have been fantastic to see the NBL at its peak power now, back when I was playing.
But you must look back on with some personal pride on all of that time, on the fact that you're able to continue to play at such a high level throughout so much upheaval.
Well, it's funny. You sort of just get told to control the controllables, and I think that's what the better players do. They take destiny into their own hands, and then they don't leave it for chance. And I'd say out of the 4 first-team All-NBL, the Melbourne Tigers one for me was probably my worst out of the lot. Now, I just had my first child at that stage. I probably wasn't the fittest I've ever been, and I probably didn't look after myself great during that period. I was probably frustrated about how everything was in my basketball career. But I think it was either Dunlap or Gorgian, and it's hard to tell the difference with their voice. But it was one of those two that just said, if you don't work hard, you're just an okay player. But if you work hard, you're a great player. So be a great player and get paid, or just be an okay player and be satisfied that you could have done more, So I just made the choice to work harder, and no matter what was thrown, whether it was not getting paid at Sydney, the Dragons folding, the last couple of months in the Gold Coast happening, those were all stuff that was out of my control. What I could control was my energy and output on the court and how I went about my business. And I thought even to my last year, I was still being valuable to that Cairns Taipans group, where, it probably put question marks in other people's eyes of why I retired when I did. But for me, it felt like the right time.
Also, your shoulder was shot.
Well, I could have rehabbed it.
Yeah.
But I didn't train the second half of the season, not one training.
Right.
And I was just getting through the game with painkillers and a few local injections just to get through. And I think I only missed 2 out of the 13 games remaining once it happened, which was a minor miracle in itself if you would have seen some of the days of how bad it was. Mm-hmm. But still finding a way to contribute to the team, even in those circumstances. I think in hindsight, I think I did everything that I could have done in that last 2 years to help that Taipans team win.
You mentioned Brian Gorgian. You played under him a lot, obviously as a national coach, and of course in the NBL as well. And he's back in the league. He's back. Like, how much do you take enjoyment to see Brian Gorgian back in the NBL?
Well, when you guys talked to him, I thought you were going to have a 3-hour special, because it's hard to get Gorge to shut up, and he does love telling stories. That being said, I think it's an incredible opportunity for the Hawks, especially the younger players, that you are just going to get an absolute mastermind of a coach that knows how to motivate, knows how to teach, and he's got a track record. Everyone talks about his winning in the NBL. Not enough is said about his development of players that he's had from a really young age to the end of their career. He has a resume of players that played underneath him at a young, even Liam,
Even.
Lim.
But I mean, that 1-point game where you got a post-game interview was pretty special.
No doubt.
But Gordon was able to develop so many good young talent, and I'm excited for someone like young Froling that now gets Gorge in there, that has history with his dad Shane, that will have a good rapport with Sam, and I expect Sam to have a great season this year.
You mentioned the South Dragons, talking Gorge. Talk to us about that entire year, because like, obviously the talent on that team still stacks up today. We see Joe Ingles still playing in the NBA, and of course Adam Gibson, of course, still in the NBL. Just talk us through what that year was like, both on and off the court, because they were talented. You were talented, but it seemed like it just all worked in, led to that wonderful grand final against Melbourne.
Well, I think it's rare that you build a team from scratch pretty much that wins a championship. Like, from the team that was there, I think we kept 3, maybe 3, possibly 4, but I think it was 3 players that we kept from that Dragons team, who were the 4-20 meat pie Dragons that year. And when Gorge first announced as head coach, he called me up and asked if I was interested in coming. Obviously, I was still under contract with Sydney, but decided to pull the pin early to leave, knowing that wasn't probably going to get up, and just sign with the Dragons and go forward. Once we got there, we worked hard. We worked really, really hard as a group. But out of all the years that I played in the NBL, I can't remember a group that enjoyed hanging out with each other off the court as much as what that Dragons team did. And it was weekly, like once or twice a week, the entire team, not just some of the team, the entire team would hang out. I remember training sessions at MSAC, and 6 and 7 of us would go over to the driving range after practice to go hit golf balls together. We just clicked as a team. And obviously when you get into a finals and you come up against someone as big as what the Melbourne Tigers had been for that 4-year stretch, we ran the same offense as the Tigers, but we ran it harder than what they did. And that's why we got so many great looks, was they knew all the wrinkles. We knew how to run it hard. And so that's what made it such a great matchup at the end of the day. And Liam will probably know this. Gorge loves playing the underdog role when it comes to grand finals. And we were on top of the ladder pretty much that entire season. So I'd done 2 grand finals with Gorgon already. And Jason Smith was the captain of Sydney. And then when I went to the Dragons, I got to be the captain of the Dragons. So I got great teachings from Jason Smith on how to be a great leader. And I remember walking up to Gorge before game 1, and I said, just out of curiosity, Gorge, what theme are you going with your speech? Well, I think I'm going to go with the underdog. The Melbourne Tigers. They've been in the grand final the last 3 years, and I think we're the new team, so I'm going to, like, no one's expecting us to win. And I said, well, Gorge, with all due respect, we are the better team. And if those words utter out of your mouth, I'm going to knock you out in front of the team. And Gorge said, I got you. And so we walked into game 1 speech versus the Tigers. And we're the better team. Hands in. As Gorge done. And that was pretty much his speech from game 1. So, yeah, he's a character. I love Gorge as a coach. Obviously right up there with my favourites, but I had so many other great coaches as well. When you actually talk about my career, I think a lot gets said about my playing career, and not enough is said about how lucky I was to play under so many great coaches throughout the span.
I just want to say the impersonation was on the money of Brian Gorge.
Quite have the finger. You didn't quite have the finger.
Well, no one can quite have the finger. but this is as close as I can get. I just need a diet right here and to scratch my head a little bit.
You talked about, I think it's one of the greatest what ifs in NBL history, that South Dragons club, because you talked about it as being the best club that you played in the NBL. What if things went differently that off season after that championship? Because from then on, it was New Zealand, 3-peat, it was the Wildcats. Those 2 teams were the teams of that next decade. what do you think the Dragons? It's an impossible question to answer, but you were right there. What do you think the Dragons would have or could have done over the next 10 years had they stayed in the league?
Well, a few things that I remember. I remember Paulie Hanare had signed with us for the next season, which no one knew about.
Okay.
And so we were bringing in another veteran guard to back up Adam Gibson that just brought another level of toughness. So you already have Mika Vacona there as well. Like, we were going to be tough again. And, you know, who knows what would have happened import-wise. Donta Smith was obviously one of the best imports to come into our league, even for that, 3 months that he was here. He made a huge impact. Tramel Darden had arguably the greatest sport, and he was on the brink of being cut a couple times throughout the season, but kept him around, and man, that paid dividends. But we also had Joe, who was destined for better things. Maybe he was gone the next season. I think he went to Zaragoza straight after us. Maybe he doesn't stick around, and that just changes the way that you never know, because like every year and every team, the team changes from year to year. We got the chemistry right in that year. You don't know if the chemistry will be right again, but I knew that we had fantastic owners in Mark Cowan and Rafi Jaminda that were committed, that were probably at the forefront of entertainment at basketball games. Like the Dragons home games was just a party. And it was something different that the NBL didn't have at that stage. But they also knew the value of looking after the players, looking after the coaches, making sure that, that was probably one of the most professional setups that I'd been a part of. And it's actually sad to think about, not being a Dragon longer than a year, because that 1 year was just so incredibly special.
Did you see it coming? Like, when it all said and done, was there whispers and all of a sudden it was gone, or was a phone call one day and it's like, this thing's done?
We had finished a pre-season training. I lived in Altona North, so I was just at the Westgate Bridge, and I had got a phone call, and I forget who called me at the time, but just said, can you call all the players and get them to the office within an hour? And I was like, that's a bit weird, And originally I thought maybe something had happened and something did something wrong, and we all briefed or whatnot. And so I remember getting there, and everyone's still smiling, and, we just had a great session on court, and they broke the news to us. And I remember just being in a bit of a haze, like this can't be happening. Like, we just won a championship. We've got to defend what we've just won. Give us that opportunity. The politics behind it that I found out later, I understood why it happened. But it would have been great to build something there, that the Dragons, having that second Melbourne team that now the Phoenix are, to have a bit of that Victorian rivalry. I think there's nothing better. We talk about Melbourne versus Sydney, but there's nothing better than a Victorian rivalry within clubs. And I was very grateful to be able to play in that, that series with the Tigers and the Dragons, which I still think will go down as one of the better grand final series in NBL history.
Hard to argue.
Let's fast forward. You talked about that 16-17 Taipans, your final season. Bryce Cotton got in the way of that thing. But does that feel like an opportunity missed? That was a very good team. You guys, I think, marched all the way to second at the end of the season.
We were last
with finals. Yeah, you were rolling coming into the finals, and you just ran into Bryce Cotton. Yeah,
I mean, when you see his body of work, he's an incredible player, and he's been the best player probably in the last decade of the NBL, of what he's been able to do with the Perth Wildcats.
That game won at your place.
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating but at the same time, if I take a holistic view on it, there's something pretty comforting about playing my last game in Perth against the Wildcats, and for years being probably public enemy number one to what I still believe is the greatest send-off in NBL history. That night in Perth Arena or RAC Arena, when it all comes down to it at the end of the day, there'll be a few things that I cherish about my career, and I'd have to say almost at the top was that send-off that I got in Perth.
What did you most appreciate about it?
I think it was almost like a truce between the fans and I in a lot of ways. I didn't make too many friends in the West over the decade. And it's pretty funny. Back when it was at Challenge Stadium, I remember one game in particular, and the crowd was really, really into me heavily, to the point where my nana rolled up a program and smacked someone over the top of the head in front of him. But he came up to me after the game. I think I was still with the Kings, so I'm thinking it's probably my third year with the Sydney Kings. A guy came up to me and says, "They boo you because you're good. Don't take our boos as we hate you. And remember, if we stop booing you, it means you're not doing your job anymore." And I always took that as all right. And like, even in that last game, I still got a few boos from the crowd. And I'm like, all right, I'm still doing my job. But then for them to give me a standing ovation as I leave the court, and, you know, it's a final, so the place is packed. There's 2,000 there. And I just remember thinking, I'm very fortunate that I have my family here for my last game. They all flew to Adelaide, funnily enough, in the last week, because we need to win 2 to get into the finals. And so I had all my family. Chris Anstey had flown over there, you know, for my last game. Adelaide gave me an awesome send-off as well with the video package before the game. All to do it all over again in Perth about a week later. But, yeah, there was just something that just put me at ease, I think, as I walked off the court, saying, like, this is the right decision after 335 games, I think it was. Like, this is where it ends. This is where it should have ended in the first place. So I was pretty happy.
It must have also kind of made you feel like, you know what, I've earned people's respect over the course of this journey.
Yeah, well, I always thought that I had people's respect, because I always sort of prided myself on, as a guy, that you'd hate to play against me, but you'd like to be my teammate. Even if you didn't know it at the time, you know, if you're my teammate, I'll try and protect you at all costs and do whatever it takes to win. If you're on the opposition, I'll do whatever it takes to win. And that means sometimes getting under people's skin, you know, changing the momentum of the game through a basketball action, or, you know, something verbal or something like that. So I always thought that people respected me, and I was quite comfortable with people not liking me. That never fazed me in the slightest. As I used to say, grab a ticket and get to the end of the line. Because at the end of the day, I knew what I was doing as a basketball player was doing the right thing for my team to win games of basketball.
Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. We just watched a ripping game. It feels like the best place to finish, actually. We've watched a wonderful story and reflection, and what was a wonderful, wonderful career. And to be fair, listening to you talk about from the very start about where you are in your coaching development and where you are, you look fit, and talking about so much that happened in your career, it's just refreshing to have a chat to you, mate, about all things. What was a wonderful career, and I love the intensity and the passion that still creeps out at different times, in particular, and talking about the Boomers jersey. So it has been, as always is on NBL Rewind for Liam and I to have a chat, and a privilege and an honour, and you're no exception, mate. It's been an absolute blast.
Boys, it's been too long since we got together and had a chat. I loved it. Nothing better. and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Well, I'll tell you what, when Liam and I are allowed out of our house and then allowed out of our suburb
That
and
would
then
be
allowed
a
out
good
of our
start.
state, we'll get over to the West and we'll hit a Wildcats game together. How does that sound?
Mate, I'll organise the courtside tickets. You guys come over here and we'll have ourselves a great time. Thanks to Greg O'Neill and Latrobe Financial. We appreciate the seats. We're claiming it now, Greg.
Done. Perfectly done.
Well
Hashtag
played.
NBL Rewind. If you haven't watched the game, get to it right now. It's a ripper. A walk-off 3 by our main man, Mark Worthington. Until next week, this has been NBL Rewind.